man was stabbed to death in one of London's wealthiest areas. Blue Stevens was killed outside a hotel in Knightsbridge on Wednesday night. And Greg Wallace says he's deeply sorry for any distress caused after a report upheld 45 out of 83 allegations against him. The production company behind MasterChef says the star's return to the show is untenable. In this city, the FTSE 100 closed up 56 points at a record high of 89.98. The pound buys $1.34 and €1.15. LBC weather, a dry night in many eastern and southern areas. Some showers lingering in parts of the west of the country with lows of 8 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm James Kitchen.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. Welcome to Monday's Cross Question. It's 8 on LBC. Joining me on the panel, to my left, Polly Billington, Labour MP for East Thanet. To her left, Mims Davies, Conservative Shadow Welsh Secretary and MP for East Grinstead and Uckfield. To my right, two panellists making their debuts on the programme. Lara Brown, Commissioning Editor at The Spectator. Welcome to you. And welcome to Neil Breakwell, who's a TV news editor and producer. Used to be Deputy Editor of Newsnight. That's where I first met him. And he's now Senior Executive Producer for October Films. They are here, as you know, to answer all of your questions. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. You can WhatsApp us on that number, text 84850, and of course you can watch us on Global Player or the LBC app.
Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Cross Question with Iain Dale. This is LBC.
Let's go to Ben in Clacton for our first question. Hello, Ben.
Hello, Ian. A good evening, panel. Yes, my question is, has Trump proved by statements today beyond reasonable doubt that he would not come to the rescue of a NATO country if it was attacked by Russia?
Polly Billington.
Well, look, I think we need to maintain our conversations with Donald Trump as much as possible in order to be able to keep him apprised of all of the different options that are available. But actually, today he has committed to supporting Ukraine, and I think that is an interesting shift from his previous position.
How has he done that? Because he's basically saying that Europe's got to pay for all the weapons that America will happily supply.
Well, he will supply them, and I think that is an important.
Should we be grateful for that?
I think we need to recognise that NATO is an alliance of people countries who need to be working together. Him providing those is a significant step forward. And yes, of course, we all know that we need to be paying for our own defence, and that includes the situation that we're talking about in Ukraine.
Mims.
Well, they're an incredibly important ally, as is NATO. So we absolutely need to keep on in with our friends across the pond, as Polly said. And I think we need to be pragmatic on Mr. Trump. He's coming over to this side of the pond, which everybody apart from the Lib Dems is really excited about. So it's probably the only time that they don't want to recall Parliament in a recess. For that, we're grateful for. Look, they are so important to us in terms of the growth that this government is so looking forward to bringing us when they can get it into sight. And we need to make sure that we're working with America on this and reminding, as Polly said, how important NATO is. It's clear at the moment we still don't have our route way to the percentages that we need. And I think this is Donald Trump, again, keeping that pressure on.
What about the answer to the question about, do you think that Trump would come to our aid, or indeed other European countries' aid, if they were attacked by Russia?
If he'll help Chelsea lift the cup, he'll come to anyone's aid.
That was weird, wasn't it?
As far as I can say. It was absolutely brilliant. And to have my 15-year-old daughter talking about, did you see that? Because she's a big Chelsea fan. Look, there's the Trump rhetoric, and then there's the deep partnerships that we have through our security services and through the work that we do. And that is not necessarily exactly what you hear in every press conference. I think this is about the President of the United States keeping the pressure on NATO partners to keep doing what they say they are committed to do. And I think this is the pressure he's keeping on.
And I was also going to say, he's announced more sanctions or tariffs on Russia. The threat of it, and
important clarification.
But that is important. The president of the United States views on how these things play out and how we can use the tools in his box in order to be able to secure an outcome is changing over time. And I think we need to keep those conversations going so that he can see how NATO can play out and be an important partner in being able to stabilise and maintain peace, as well as push against aggressors like Putin.
Neil Breakwell.
I think the big headache for NATO is the fact that the question has to be asked. I mean, the point of NATO is that it's an assumption that if a member is attacked, all of those respond and come to the aid. And it really is genuinely still and remains and sits there as a slight open question as to would Trump actually come to the wicket if a European NATO member was invaded by Russia. That's why it's so difficult to sort of say NATO's working properly. Because yes, he went along to the summit. He got called daddy. It seemed like the relationship. That's a good positive step, right? If you're called daddy, that's a thumbs up moment. But it's not. It's not we just don't feel very confident in Trump. And that's why NATO remains slightly fragile as an organisation. It's why the West feels fragile. And I think until Trump really just gets past that suggestion that Europe could be on their own if it's not transactional for me, until we get the trust that America will absolutely deliver, then Europe has no choice but to essentially, if you really want to be pragmatic.
But we're never going to get that while he's in the White House, are we? That's
no, but what we might have to do is build up, and Europe obviously is now. We're now reaching for defence spending, which no European country was imagining having to do before, and it's happening because we cannot rely on the military support of the US. That is why we are now breaching busting your spending plans, Polly, because we're having to spend to ensure against Trump not coming to fight if required.
Lara.
We have to meet Trump where he's at. We know that Trump is a real pragmatist. It's possible that he doesn't buy into some of the ideas of NATO we'd like him to. And therefore, the most important thing that we can do is step up defence spending, make sure that NATO isn't completely reliant on America. And it's also meet Trump where he's at. So today, I'm tentatively hopeful. This is relatively good news. Trump's coming to Ukraine's aid, but he's set some conditions down. He's going to provide weapons that we just don't have, we don't manufacture, and that we need him to. And he wants us to pay for them. And it is worth remembering that the NATO SecGen has called that totally rational. He's not out of step with NATO there at all. We need to now up our defence spending, pay for those weapons, because the most important thing is that Ukraine gets the aid. I also think we have to be careful about making assumptions about Trump's actions within NATO from this war. I think Trump's doing much more to support Ukraine, but it is obviously true that Ukraine is not a member of NATO, and for him the calculations might be different.
And what do you all think about maybe the scales are falling from Trump's eyes on Putin? Because he has criticised Putin in the past, but fairly obliquely. Today, it was straight between the eyeballs, wasn't it?
I don't think Trump likes being embarrassed. And I think Trump came into the White House promising that he had a relationship with Putin that meant he could bring this war to a close. And he obviously dragged Zelensky into a set of very painful concessions. And then he turned to Russia and realised that even with that deal, they weren't prepared to move. And I think what's happened here is my guess, that Trump sort of snapped. He feels embarrassed by Putin, and now he's turning on Russia.
But I think Putin likes to do the embarrassing. Putin enjoys moments of walking people up and then changing course and forcing them to do things almost to his tune. And Trump has threatened sanctions before in May, and they came to nothing. So I think unless Putin really feels the heat on his neck, he will always push the envelope. It's part of his game plan and strategy to just test and push NATO allies. Trump's reliance and sort of faith in them as much as he can. That is the way Putin does it. He enjoys seeing world leaders embarrassed.
But you could look at it from the other point of view and say, well, Putin's played this wrongly, because if he had agreed to some sort of fake kind of ceasefire, which, let's face it, he did the last time, Trump wouldn't have done this today.
I just think there's still time on Putin's hand to make a change of course if he wants to. For now, he can. He's still got in 50 days, even before these these sanctions might come through or not. So I think Putin always plays for time, and what he's proved to do so far is to keep pushing for time, keep dropping more and more. In fact, there's more drones attacks on Kyiv at the moment than there's been almost since the start of the war. So things are not getting better for Ukraine.
Mims?
Well, I think we're trying to judge, one president and one person called Putin in a way that we do business. And we got to, and that's what's being alluded to here. That's not how we do things. And of course, Donald Trump came back into the White House on this wave thinking, people are going to sing to my tune and, two tough men square up to each other and we're equals, and have found exactly as just described. You get led up the garden path, maybe, potentially. So I think we know that we're out of peace dividend. We know that in order to sustain NATO and protect ourselves, we have to not jump to every utterance, but take defence properly seriously. And anybody, whether it's, my colleague Ben Wallace and others, warned even us that we need to get this right. Things are changing, and we're seeing this before our very eyes, and we can't second guess. The only thing we can second guess is that to strengthen NATO in our country, we have to find the defence spending that we're committed to and know that unless we take that seriously, then we're vulnerable.
Apropos of nothing, Peter says, bring back Diane Abbott. I wasn't aware she'd gone anywhere, but
is she in Corbyn's party now?
Who knows?
Is Corbyn in Corbyn's party?
No, he doesn't know.
Well, that may come up as a question later. You never know. 0345 6060 973 if you'd like to ask a question to our panel. Let's take a slightly early break, because the next question we probably want to take quite a long time with. It's 12 minutes past 8.
This is LBC.
Chase.
Leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
40 minutes past 8. On the panel with us today, Conservative Shadow Welsh Secretary, Mims Davies. Now, how come you're Shadow Welsh Secretary when you represent East Grinstead?
Oh, stop rubbing it in, Iain. Well, unfortunately, particularly with Polly sat next to us, there's a reminder of just how badly we did in the election, and sadly, we are very depleted in Wales. So,
how many have you got?
0. But you've got me and Darren Miller and all of the team of MSs and our wonderful team there locally. But so I'm not Welsh. My kids are half Welsh. I lived there 10 years. Big part of my life.
And you're called Davies. So
I'm called Davies, so I qualify.
Polly Billington is Labour MP for East Thanet. Lara Brown, commissioning editor of The Spectator, and TV news editor and producer Neil Breakwell. They are here to answer your questions. No name left on this one. We do like a name, please. It's a WhatsApp question. Former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert and leader of the opposition Yair Lapid have described Israeli plans for Gaza as a concentration camp. Are they right? Well, the Israeli Defense Minister, Israel Katz, has proposed the building of what he's called a humanitarian city on the ruins of Rafah to initially house 600,000 people. The IDF is said to be opposing these plans, while, as our questioner says, both former Prime Minister Olmert and opposition leader Lapid have condemned the proposals. Neil?
Yeah, I mean, as I understand it, this place, if they go there, you can't leave unless it's abroad. So that sounds to me like a place where you're trapped and imprisoned. And I don't feel qualified to compare what have been real concentration camps to what something hasn't happened. But in terms of, does that sound like a place of great human suffering to come? If that was to happen and displace of Palestinians, then yes, it would be an appalling place for citizens of a country to end up.
This phrase, concentration camp, is hugely evocative, not least because it's mentioned by Israelis, and of course it was. I think most people think of the Holocaust when they think of concentration camps, but it can cover a multitude of different types of places. They don't actually have to be death camps, do they?
I guess not, but I guess what it is not is a homeland of people for which they have autonomy to be able to move between borders. That is, and arguably Gaza was not that anyway, but it seems to me another step up to making a conditions of lives for Palestinians which is not possible to exist in any form of peace settlement.
Lara?
Concentration camp is a really evocative term. It's a technical legal term. And I think with the war in Israel, terms like this are thrown around without much regard for what is happening. What I would say is I don't think this is a pragmatic or sensible policy proposal. The priority post-war is that the Palestinians are able to, have something resembling a homeland, and also that once Hamas are eradicated, they are not allowed to regain the sort of control that they held over Gaza City. And I think a place that houses 600,000 Palestinians, which they are not able to leave, will be a breeding ground for terrorist sentiment. It will be a very easy place to take control of. And I think we will see all the problems in Gaza that led to October the 7th emerge again.
When you say eradicate Hamas, how do you define eradicate?
This is a really difficult one. I do not envy people making decisions about how to run this war, but you need to see the senior leaders of Hamas taken out, I think. You need to get to a position where Hamas do not have the infrastructure to continue to elevate people to those roles, to continue to run and manage and control the inflow of resources to an entire people. As long as Hamas are able to get their hands on aid, as long as they're able to control the majority of fuel to Gaza or to this location, they will be able to control how wars are conducted and how the politics of the area operate.
OK, Mims.
I'm just appalled by the thought of any of this. I was just thinking this is about as far away from a two-state solution, and the happiness of those youngsters who were at that music festival where all of this has escalated from, to then hear this type of phrase in any kind of communication. My heart breaks to think that we've got to try and find any way to justify other than trying to go back to what we know is what is needed, which is exactly what everyone agrees is a two-state solution and peace with those hostages returned. And as you say, the problem is the more awful things happen, the more it emboldens people to a cause that only makes things worse. And, I actually feel sick to my stomach at the moment, feeling that, this is just feels like it's only going to get worse if these sorts of things are even thought as any kind of possibility.
Holly?
I think if you're talking about where we want to get to, which is a peaceful solution where you've got two states, where people have got autonomy and freedom, this is definitely a step backwards. It probably breaches international law. It may well be a crime against humanity. I don't know. But we need to be quite clear that when Israeli people use the language of concentration camps, it does have an extra weight because people from Israel do know and understand the implications of that language. And so I think this is a very significant intervention.
Right, let's move on to another important question, particularly in the news today. Neil will have been expecting this one. The text question from Jamie in Hendon. Is it time to defund the BBC? Now, separate reports published today have found the BBC missed opportunities to clamp down on the inappropriate behaviour of former MasterChef presenter Greg Wallace, and that the documentary Gaza, How to Survive a War Zone, breached the corporation's guidelines by not disclosing that the narrator was the son of a Hamas minister. Meanwhile, the BBC's Director General has told Parliament's Culture, Media and Sport Committee that there were BBC staff working at Glastonbury who had the option to cut off the live stream of the hugely controversial, I'm not going to mention his name because I don't want to give him publicity, performance. Lots of questions there. I'll start again with you, Neil, if I may. So the question is it time to defund the BBC?
No, simply no is the answer to the immediate question. But obviously, you highlight some difficulties the BBC have gone through, and they're all sort of different issues actually. So I could take perhaps one or two of them. But I mean, on the Gaza film that they. This is the case where the child narrator of the BBC film was it wasn't asked. Well, the question was asked, but they didn't get the answer before broadcasting it. That his father was a deputy agriculture minister, and clearly that was. And the report today has found that breached editorial guidelines of accuracy. Or, interestingly, not of impartiality, and in that case, that is one film of many current affairs BBC films that they put out across the year where these problems have not emerged, and they're all quite tricky compliance issues. And I've been in that situation, and I continue to be, where I make films sometimes for the BBC, and you go through this scenario where you have an executive producer and then a commissioning editor, and the conversation with that is quite helpful in terms of getting the film up to almost ready for broadcast. And then this sort of moment happens where, and I think this is what happened in this case, it's then sent round to a huge number of people in chinos to dip their nose in, often from a cold start, to have a look and raise their hand and have their say. And I don't think it's a question of a lack of skills and editorial experience, because there's some really good editors and commissioners in the BBC. I think, though, there often happens at that end point where lots of voices chip in, and it's almost a sort of false sense of security that we've got a lot of clever minds. Everyone's had a look at this, and no one fully takes it on their shoulders in the BBC to own the film that they're about to put to air. It is almost too diffuse, too many editors, too many cooks.
And you had to make some of these decisions when you were deputy editor of Newsnight. I mean, Newsnight at that time used to make lots of these sorts of films.
Yeah, but Newsnight, and interesting that Newsnight did actually sit slightly more as a singular programme with a real editor at the top of it, and we were much more free. We sort of hated the rest of BBC News. Actually, we sort of operated very.
Showed.
I hope it wasn't lost. You try to, but the virtue of that, I do think, was that you had then empowered editors to want to make the programme rather than commission a programme based on some guess of what the broad BBC strategy or commission or other bosses above them might be thinking, and the same decisions and thoughts and cares about the show or the film were at the top of your mind because it was very much your film putting out and no one else in the BBC got to see it. Now there's almost too many people involved, and I think, as I say, the people involved in this, they're not bad people. They wouldn't have done it on purpose. But I think there was a general sense of, someone must have checked this somewhere, and they obviously didn't. Polly
Billington used to be a BBC journalist as well.
Yeah,
so what's your view on this?
Well,
because Lisa Nandy, your colleague, has been fairly vituperative about Tim Davie in particular.
Well, my short answer to the question, is it time to defund the BBC, is no. I mean, I worked for the BBC a long time ago for a long time, and this question comes up with tedious regularity from people who would rather not have a reliable, impartial source of news. And when the BBC makes a mistake, which it does, what it fails to do is correct that mistake and get through to understanding how they can avoid it next time fast enough. I know that from having been involved when there was a Hutton inquiry when I was a journalist there. It felt like an internal nervous breakdown in a fight with the government.
And the
when
BBC,
there is a fight with the government,
nothing more than
a story about itself.
Navel gazing.
Yes, absolutely. So I think they need to stop navel gazing, make some quick decisions, and make sure that they can restore the trust of the audiences who rely on impartial and accurate.
But that's
reporting.
quite difficult, isn't it?
Is.
Particularly in this area, where on Gaza, you've got British Jews, who, I'm generalising here, but generally do not think the BBC is covering itself in glory, and there are allegations of anti-Semitism within the BBC. And then on the other side, you've got the pro-Gazans who don't think they're getting fair coverage either.
'Twas ever thus. I mean, I used to, on occasion, have to dip my nose into the email complaints when I was working on the BBC.
Were you ever on Points of View?
Politics desk at Millbank.
Oh my!
And every time there was something about the Middle East, it would be, as you say, vituperative. So that's not new. I think what's interesting about what Neil's pointed out is that they've decided that this is a failure of accuracy rather than impartiality. And I think this goes also to that kind of culture of Newsnight, which sometimes might need to be more widespread in the BBC. You might not be able to pass an impartiality test these days, but you can pass an accuracy test. And that is the one that was failed here. Now, I think that's reasonable for there to be an inquiry, but that also, this is an independent organisation that should be completely free and independent of the government, because that is the way that we successfully have the kind of freedom of speech and healthy media landscape that we've got in this country.
Just to come back, I mean, what this does is, in a way, the Greg Wallace thing, where there is a similarity, the BBC used this sort of quaint phrase today with the Greg Wallace case, where they said opportunities were missed. And you think,
the passive voice.
You sort of think, hang on, your highly paid, lucrative main profile presenter walks in front of a production team without his pants on. You don't really miss that. You just, it's not an opportunity missed, that's just an opportunity not acted upon. Right? It is this sense of things can just go wrong. And it just got to, like, the fact we didn't know something. So in the case of the Gaza film, they weren't told, as they should have been by the production company making it, that this kid had the link. And in the same way, I suspect there are plenty of senior executives at the BBC who weren't told always about the behaviour of Greg Wallace, but someone knew. And where the BBC has a responsibility.
I think there's two things on that. I think on the accuracy, that's a lack of curiosity by the senior people who are supposed to be signing it off when it comes to the documentary. Or when it comes to Greg Wallace, they could have asked any woman. Frankly, and that is quite a lot of the culture.
Or allowed a system, and this is what has been absent clearly. I mean, Greg Wallace, in his efforts to sort of head this off, suggested that it was a sort of contained period between 2005 and 2018, a mere 13 years of terrible behaviour. But they don't allow, and I know this from working in production companies, and it is getting better. But the point is, if you are, which most people in TV are, freelance and don't have any job security, there is absolutely no system for them saying, I saw this presenter do something terrible without fear that they won't get hired.
Okay. Even knowing that
there's poor talent management.
Let's bring in Mims and Lara. Mims first.
Well, I had the pleasure of working at the BBC during what was called Creative Futures under Greg Dyke, which was basically moving everything up north, which was fine. But I totally agree with the point that Neil's made. There's a massive, gargantuan organisation where the left and the right hand do not know what they're doing. Equally, so too many silos, and now at the moment too many cooks and everybody trying to do the same or different jobs and thinking other people are doing it. I think what we've seen is a lack of curiosity to prevent misconduct. I completely agree with the point that untouchable talent versus people who had a temporary BBC pass, and I was someone who saw that. But I do see a lot of people who work very, very hard, who, don't get listened to and don't get supported. And I think there is a feeling of a lack of accountability, lack of accuracy, and hence Ofcom are involved. I love the BBC. I love working for it. I love everything it does. Not everything's perfect. But there is a danger because of this lack of action, lack of challenging talent, allowing certain big voices just to say what they want in social media. There's no way I could be a member of a political party or out there when I worked at the BBC. Why has that changed? Why has that not been challenged? Because they're in danger of signing their own, reduction in people's love and care, and therefore wanting to pay for it if they don't do something about it.
Almost as bad as Parliament.
Look, hey, we're all working on building up trust. The fact that when I left the BBC, people went, "Oh my goodness, you're so nice and a Tory," that's a big surprise. It just kind of sums up the BBC attitude sometimes to people. But I've got some great friends there, and actually, that's how it should be. You shouldn't know people's views, and you should be reporting accurately.
Now, Lara, you're the only panel member that's never worked for the BBC.
Yeah.
So let's get your perspective.
It's only a matter of time.
So on Greg Wallace, there were 83 complaints against him. 45 were upheld. That is more than a lack of curiosity.
Yeah, exactly.
Something has gone profoundly wrong. There was clearly a completely inadequate escalation procedure. I want a proper investigation into how that was ignored. People, women, suffered on those sets. On the BBC Gaza documentary, you don't defund the BBC over one mistake. I wouldn't defund the BBC. But I will say this. If the BBC is simply going to buy its programming in from production companies and then blame those companies... Yeah. Sorry.
Neil's very keen on that.
Yeah. And then blame those companies for the mistakes. What's the point of having the BBC? And I read the report today, and they've put the blame on Heyo Media for failing to establish that the narrator had a father who's a senior Hamas official. The BBC chose to purchase that documentary. They chose to air it. They used their brand that people trust. No one's got any idea where documentaries come from. Oh, sorry, they chose to purchase it. The failure to fact-check that and establish the narrator's relationship to Hamas is on them. I'm disappointed they haven't taken ownership.
I think the BBC have tried to sort of acknowledge that is a weakness, and I think as part of their mitigations now or new processes, they're going to try to put in a senior BBC executive, literally almost embed them with the production company, which does sort of...
What old-fashioned questions like, who is this?
Where's he from? I think just to be closer to...
It's not record science. It's a who, what, why, well.
These are
particularly a young person as well.
I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily to have that. It's going to cost the BBC more money to make this. This is the trouble. It's all going to start costing more money to make this if you involve more people. But as I say, I don't think it's a question of a lack of number of people. I think the opposite is true, that sometimes there is too many people and no one fully shouldering. I mean, we don't really know who's culpable in this, frankly, even today.
They probably don't know.
Why wasn't
they might not. No, exactly. And of course that process has to happen, but it's the fact that you don't have someone who's just carrying this from start to finish is part of the problem.
And in the BBC and in a lot of other places, there is a culture of deputy heads will roll. Did you ever feel that your head might have rolled when you were deputy
I rolled myself out before it was before that happened. I don't know. I don't think the BBC is into dumping on deputy editors if they can avoid it. I in a way, I think you get to the point where it's often quite murky who really is responsible, and it's. And actually, it's probably the lack of firings at the BBC that is more common than firings.
Right. Well, on that bombshell, we'll move on to other subjects in the next half an hour here on Cross Question. It's 8:33, time for the news headlines on LBC with Jamie Kitchen.
A couple have been found guilty of gross negligence manslaughter over the death of their newborn daughter. Baby Victoria was found dead in a shopping bag in Brighton in 2023 after Constance Martin and Mark Gordon spent 2 months on the run. The US has agreed to sell weapons to NATO to help Ukraine in its conflict with Russia. Donald Trump says he's sending top-of-the-line supplies to the alliance. And it's emerged all 4 people killed in yesterday's plane crash at Southend Airport were foreign nationals. Flights have been grounded until further notice while an air accident investigation gets underway. LBC weather, a dry night in many eastern and southern areas. Some showers lingering in parts of the west of the country with lows of 8 degrees.
This is LBC. Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
Love it.
8:35 on LBC. Mims Davies is with us, Conservative Shadow Welsh Secretary and MP for East Grinstead and Uckfield. Polly Billington, Labour MP for East Thanet. Lara Brown, Commissioning Editor for The Spectator, and TV News Editor and Producer Neil Breakwell. Chris is in Stubbington. Hello, Chris.
Hello, Ian and panel. The Met Office has said extreme weather is the new normal. Should government grants be available for air conditioning to help the vulnerable?
So the question is, the Met Office has said extreme weather is the new normal. Should government grants be available for air conditioning to help the vulnerable? Now, in addition, the Energy Secretary, Ed Miliband, has said that climate change is threatening Britain's way of life through both heat waves and flooding becoming increasingly regular. Polly, let's come to you first, because you used to be Ed Miliband's special advisor back in
I'm also
the Brown
on the
government.
Energy Security and Net Zero Select Committee.
That's even more important.
More importantly,
what's your answer
now,
to
yes.
Chris's question?
Well, yeah, I think he's right. I mean, I've been banging on for some time about the fact that if you have poorly insulated homes, older people in particular and other vulnerable people are extremely exposed to the risks of extreme heat. We know how many people have died previously when there has been extreme heat over the summer. We need to be thinking about that as much as our sort of warm homes vibe, because we've got cold and drafty and shonky old housing stock. We tend to think of this as fundamentally an issue about fuel poverty, about keeping people warm. Well, actually, with increasing changes in extreme weather conditions, we do need to be thinking about making sure that we've got aircon for people who really need it.
Polly, I'm just interested here because on one hand, you support grants for aircon, but on the other, the current legislation makes it almost impossible to build aircon. I mean, legalising aircon would be a good step forward. The London plan has a presumption against aircon. Builders are encouraged not to put aircon in new builds. And you have to get planning permission in a lot of this country to add aircon to your homes. So rather than giving people money for aircon, let's make it possible for them to have it.
Well, we can also change the rules in order to be able to support it. I don't have any objection to that. I just think we also need to, once we're changing those rules, if we only leave it to changing the rules, the people who can afford it will do it. And we need to also make sure that particularly the vulnerable, who tend to be old, and particularly in old and poorly insulated houses, those can be actually much worse. Then we need to be able to make sure that we've got the support for those people. And the Warm Homes Plan, for example, probably needs to be renamed the Comfortable Homes Plan, so that people actually get that kind of support.
Let me give you a human example of this, and I guess this is why Chris is asking the question. My partner's Auntie Sandy, who I think is, she does listen to LBC, maybe she's listening now, but she's in her early 80s. She lives in a terraced house in Tunbridge Wells, and it's like a furnace. So it's a real thing. She's come to stay with us for the last 2 or 3 weeks because we've got a bedroom that actually is naturally quite cool. And I'm thinking, well, what about her neighbour? If she hasn't got somebody that she can go and stay with, what happens to her? Well, the answer is she could die.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely a real thing. We know when there's been heat waves before that the vulnerable, particularly the elderly, but not only the elderly, are more likely to die in this situation, and therefore we do need to be thinking about it. And poorly insulated homes, I think people think that if it's poorly insulated, if you're well insulated, it'll be overheating. No, actually, you need to make sure that that's the insulation, as well as facilitating better air exchange.
Lara.
I'm really pro aircon. Deaths go up in heat waves roughly as much as they go up in cold weather. It's very dangerous to be in a hot home. We have had consistent policy aiming to prevent people from having aircon in their homes. I think that's quite unforgivable. I'm struggling to understand how increasing the number of people who have aircon, which I want to do, is compatible with this government's net zero plans, because obviously aircon relies on higher energy consumption than is currently the goal.
Well, it'll be electric, and once we get to clean energy, once we have, we've got our 2030 clean energy target for a reason, and electricity will be one of the ways that you will power it, and particularly when you have air-to-air heat. I'm sorry, I'm being really boring. Air-to-air heat exchangers.
I just nearly fell asleep.
I know. It's the trouble with being fairly techy, and I keep being warned against it. But the reality is, if you have the right kit, you can have both. You can have warmer homes in the winter and cooler homes in the summer, and rely on clean, reliable, secure and cheaper electricity.
Mims.
Well, Polly interrupting me being vaguely flippant on this, because I was going to say if Ed Miliband could let you plug it through your EV through the car, he might be happy about it. But in all seriousness, one of my friends who's in her 80s today, who lives in a block of flats, contacted me exactly as we heard from Lara about the frustrations on the building regulations and the fact that if she did anything, she'd need her neighbours to be happy about it, which they aren't, because they're worried about noise and the impact of this. And actually, she wants to do something active about this. And there is no easy way of doing this. And as we heard, as was it Chris said from the Met Office, this is a fact of life. Life is getting warmer and we're going to see more flooding. And we absolutely need our building regulations to work this way. And we had a big climate lobby, didn't we, Polly, last week from many of our constituents, and we were talking exactly about this. Climate change and the experience for people has to be fair to everybody wherever you live. In Tunbridge Wells, in that row of houses that Iain was rightly talking about. You can't do net zero to people. You've got to bring them on the journey, and there is a danger if we don't do this. It feels, second, third or fourth tier according to your back pocket and what your housing situation allows you. And there are 2 or 3 big purchases we'll ever make in life. One of them is a car. The car industry, and many people are voting with their feet where they can to get the best car they can to be environmentally friendly. Obviously, the impact of weight on roads and batteries and all of that, notwithstanding. But also our housing, and the housing sector and the building sector needs to catch up and be able to deliver how people want to live. And frankly, as Chris is pointing out, need to live so that it can be a comfortable experience, as Polly says.
Okay, before we come to Neil, let's include this question from Hugo. He says, should the government hold its course on its net zero policies despite constant attacks from Reform and Kemi Badenoch, who will be sitting in the studio with me tomorrow between 8 and 9, sitting exactly where Polly is sitting now, and should be taking your calls. Neil?
I guess the key word about it is mitigation. And actually, really, the net zero 5 years ago, probably most, even all parties sort of signed up to expect that to be able to be achieved, or at least aimed at or kept as a policy. And I think there is a realisation now, even among Labour, if they won't say it, that even if they won't say they won't not get there, the speed, they've already dropped the amounts of money they're going to be spending to get to it. So you've got to, that only means one thing. You've got to then, in its place, deal with the consequences which will inevitably come from climate change and hotter countries. And so, of course, you're going to have to double up the speed by which we make places cooler and not kill people, because it's going to get too hot too quick. And in a sense, the further we get away from net zero, the faster we have to move towards technology or mitigation towards what is going to be really difficult living, certainly for older people.
So just on this net zero question, Polly, obviously you're going to say the government is going to hold its course, but I mean, it's costing so much money that Rachel Reeves may well come after Ed Miliband's budget.
No, in fact, he won the comprehensive spending review quite comprehensively by securing £13.5 billion for this warm homes plan, which is really important for all of the things we've been talking about: the insulation, the clean and secure and cheaper energy, and so forth. And this is, again, an economic growth opportunity. Everybody recognises that, with the exception of Reform, and weirdly in the chamber today. I know Mims is okay on this, but it was very odd to hear your front bench sort of saying, it's all gone too far, when, it's Theresa May who, as a Prime Minister, signed up to this because she could see that this was not only some kind of moral imperative, but it's a hard-headed economic imperative.
But if it's hard-headed and economic, then people are going to be shouting at their radios now saying, why have we got the highest electricity bills, the highest fuel bills
one of the
Europe?
Reasons, because we've relied on gas for so long, sorry again to be a bit techie, the prices of our electricity track volatile oil and gas prices. And what we've done over a period of time is put a whole lot of those policy costs on the cleanest bit of our energy, the electricity, rather than on the dirty bit. So those are two of the things that we're looking at in the Energy Select Committee to work out how we can change the way that we actually charge for energy while supporting people. And that's why I'm campaigning for an energy social tariff while that change goes ahead. Because at the moment, why we got that big spike in 2022 was because of the invasion of Ukraine. That ended up completely, no one else was screwed up like we were because of our dependence on gas, and that's what
we
the
have
price
loads of
tracks.
gas in the North Sea, so why should we be screwed up by it?
Well, because that is the wholesale price.
Your government won't allow new exploration.
Well, I'm completely comfortable with that, as you know, Ian, and I'm perfectly happy to carry on explaining why.
Mim, just very briefly, what about Polly's description of your front bench? They seem to be a bit different to your views on
So
this.
I think you'll hear from Kemi tomorrow night, and I hope I explained it. Look, we moved back from 2030 to 2035 in terms of, vehicles and being sensible, and how do we get to where we need to be in 2050. And what Kemi did in one of her first scene setters as leader of the opposition, has said it's time to tell the truth about the realities of this. Now, what Polly has missed out on this is that obviously Great British Energy is, got around £9 billion and won't produce one penny of energy. So the government is spending a lot of money on a shell company where we should be seeing investment from the sector. So again, I think it goes back to the point about bringing people on the journey, doing the best we can, getting it right.
Including your own front bench.
Well, we've only got Polly's word for what was said on the front bench. I didn't see that.
Hands up tomorrow.
I think it would be difficult to say there wasn't some healthy scepticism about how this is being done under Labour, and that's right. That's our job as the opposition. Hey presto.
Polly, hang on a second, because Lara hasn't had a word on this.
I want to contextualise these high gas prices first. The reason gas is so expensive is because when energy demand gets so high that we have to resort to gas, because we cannot do this with green energy at the moment.
Exactly.
It's not possible. We have to turn on gas plants for sometimes a matter of hours and then turn them off again. That is extremely expensive. We're also not using the North Sea, so that is why gas is so expensive. On net zero more broadly, we have the highest energy prices in the G7 and we have a cost of living crisis. People are poorer every day. People are struggling with their budgets because of these policy decisions. I think that's untenable. Why do we need to achieve net zero by 2030? What is so important about that date? The UK is responsible for less than 1% of global emissions. 2030, 35, 40, what's the difference? And is it worth spending? I think the current forecasts are about 37 billion it would cost. And that's assuming that you do complete wholesale grid reform, because the current problem is we cannot get all of this green energy onto the grid and into people's homes. The grid is just not built for that. It won't work.
Well, I'm looking forward to you welcoming the changes that Ed Miliband is making on the issues to do with the grid, so that we can get those zombie projects off and the good projects on, so that we can create more jobs. We've got 1 million people working already in the clean energy sector in this country. This is an enormous economic opportunity. It feels a little bit sometimes like when, like in the industrial resolution, everyone's saying, "Oh no, we don't want any of that steam power. We want to stick with our cart and horse." That is how outdated it is to be looking backwards to dirty fossil fuels rather than forwards to clean, reliable, and cheap energy.
Right, you're listening to LBC. It's Cross Question at 8:49.
This is LBC. Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
Right, it's 8:51. Mims Davies, Polly Billington, Lara Brown and Neil Breakwell here taking your calls. James is in air. Hello, James.
Oh, hello, Iain. Nice to speak to you again. I just watched today a magnificent cricket match between India and England from Lord's Cricket Ground, where supporters sat together and were together and cheered and were happy to be together. And I coupled it with the death of Mr. Thanet last week, who actually, and I'm not abusing the man's memory, who actually talked about a cricket test. And I just wondered if this is not a really positive sign as to how race relations have improved in the United Kingdom in the last, 30 or 40 years. I was just so encouraged to see these supporters at a really exciting sporting event, but sharing the excitement in a friendly way.
Well, Norman Tebbit, of course, died last Monday at the age of 94, and he came up with this idea in April 1990 that first or even second-generation immigrants to Britain from South Asia or the Caribbean should support England in cricket matches against their ancestral homeland, and those who don't do so are not prepared or not properly integrated into British society. And I remember thinking at the time, if I moved to Australia and the England cricket team came to Australia, well, of course I would still support England. And I was never quite sure that I could see what he was driving at, but I didn't really ever agree with it. Lara, are you a cricket fan?
I'm going to have to lay my cards on the table here. I'm familiar with the Tebbit test. I can comment on that. I do not follow the cricket at all. I don't know how cricket works. I'm very confused by it.
You've missed a great test series against India this year.
But I hear it's gone well. I think the Tebbit test is an effective test for the reasons that you just said. If you moved to Australia, you probably would still feel quite English for a very long time. And if you were turning the cricket on and watching and rooting for England, it doesn't mean that you're a problem for Australia, but it means that you are still fundamentally English and you view yourself as English and you don't feel that you've integrated into Australian culture. And I think, obviously it was a test that ran people watching cricket, but I think the moment at which you feel excited to watch your adopted nation win a sporting match is probably a very good way of knowing that you've fully integrated into that country.
And I think if you're an immigrant to this country from India and you support India in a test match, I think that's entirely understandable. But I would expect that person to support England playing anyone else as a sort of secondary supporter.
League.
So hierarchy.
Yeah, hierarchy. Neil?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, sport is just sort of wonderful at breaking down moments in the country that we find so difficult to kind of get right. It just sort of levels everything. And I guess my only hope is that there are more occasions where big national sporting occasions with national teams can and will be in future seen on television. And the risk really is that so many of those big games and matches will be bought up or not be able to watch. So I think the main thing is that people, when these do happen, are able to see it and access it and get tickets to see it.
Polly?
It just feels like a ludicrous purity test from my perspective. Like I'm not with Lara. Like I don't follow cricket, right? That's not my bag. But I don't really mind who people support. My wife is part Spanish, and she always backs Spain in whatever it is, and I completely respect that. It doesn't bother me in any way. She thinks it's ridiculous because if I have England on, she's like, "What have you got that on for? You don't even you don't even care about football." So it feels to me it's more important that you're actually passionate about the sport than whichever nationality of the team involved.
Mims?
I love a bit of cricket. I'd love to have had time to go and watch that. And what an amazing outcome today. Look, I'm very confused because I lived in Wales for 10 years. My kids are half Welsh. They will always choose England and Wales according to whoever's doing better at that point when it comes to football. So that's very, very normal. And, if you speak to people in Wales and Scotland, they would never get behind us. And just look at Andy Murray half the time. He's, sticks to his guns. But having said that, I've been very confused because I worked in media for 10 years in Wales, more or less. So I became Wenglish. I supported Wales. And then there's times, obviously, we got the Lions out there. Everyone comes together now.
Let's go back to the question, though, because, I mean, race relations 40 years ago in this country, I think, were very different to what they are now. Do you think sport has played a role in the general... I'm slightly hesitating with the words I use here because people say, oh, yes, but what about that or this incident that happened? But I think generally things are better. What do you attribute that too.
Yeah, as a former sports minister and someone who did a lot of work following my and our lovely friend Tracy Crouch around getting women's sport covered, seeing not as niche, seeing absolutely for the impressive feats that are there. And my two daughters have grown up seeing that as equal value as men's sport. And I think it is completely unifying. And at the moment, while there is division and while there is upset, I think it's wonderful to see everyone flying our flag and getting behind our country. And just going back to London 2012, how we felt then. I did the early part of putting together the Birmingham Commonwealth Games, how brilliant that is. It's massively unifying, and I think we can be positive, whether we're second, third generation, or we just happen to know someone remotely about success, and seeing real good, positive competition. But above all, to see England pulling out the bag today, that was so impressive.
It swung in every direction. It was today and not on Sunday.
Yeah, you missed out.
So I missed it.
Yeah, absolutely. And just watching people's Instagram of how much they've been loving being there in the sunshine, something uniquely British. And what I also love about cricket, I was down at Buxted Cricket Club just recently in my own patch. You see that replicated in every area. You know, it's wonderful to see communities coming together, that uniquely British thing. I'm sure you see a lot of that in Kent as well.
And when I grew up in Essex, I played for Ashton Villa Football Club. Get it?
Yeah.
Not football club, cricket club. Okay. And my highlight was 15 not out.
Oh, I played in the under-13 Colts. And just two girls in the team.
Right.
27 not
Our
out.
fun question comes from Andy in Camberley. After Trump bizarrely joined in with Chelsea's Football Club World Cup celebrations, and it's going off my screen because somebody's scrolling the screen so I can't read it. Stop. No, it's still not there properly. I don't know why it does that. Last night, by refusing to move out of the way during the trophy presentation, which famous person would you like to join you to celebrate your next big success? Now, this is assuming that you've actually already had a success, but with our illustrious panel, I'm sure that is true. Polly, let's go to you.
If I get re-elected in Thanet, I would love to be on that platform with Cher, because she is a massive Pugin fan, and Pugin has got a very strong Pugin fan, and Pugin not only designed the House of Parliament, also has a strong link to Ramsgate, including having his home there. I'd love to invite her to Thanet and be on the stage if I get re-elected.
If you could turn forward time.
And I'm perfectly happy to be upstaged by Cher. I think that's
it's possible that might happen.
It might happen,
is very
and I also think it's camp enough, don't you?
Yes, very. Neil?
It would not be Greg Wallace, even though it's free. I mean, it's easy to say who you wouldn't want there. I wouldn't mind Trump, actually. He's so sort of jolly and enthusiastic, his little face beaming.
This is your biggest success. It's a beautiful success.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you want someone to over-inflate the success
we
of whatever it might be...
We should get Corey in here, because his Trump impression is magnificent. It really is. But
I stand by for it. I mean, Trump is the best person at inflating a success.
Lara?
I have to confess, I don't win trophies that regularly, but, you know...
What was the last one you won?
God, I think I was very bad at sport as a child, so I'm not sure I've ever won a trophy, actually. But I think, assuming that I've somehow pulled off some great feat, I'm going to use it to nakedly meet one of my heroes, so it would have to be Tom Holland for the rest is history.
I want to meet Tom Holland naked.
I desperately want to meet Tom Holland. I just want to hear him tell me about all of my favourite bits of history. I think it'd be fascinating. Listen to him every week for several years. Just get him on the pitch.
Have you ever listened to the Where Politics Meets History podcast with me and Tessa Dunlop?
I have, yes. Also a very big fan. But I've now met you, so I can't say you anymore.
Yeah. Mims?
Well, I wanted to say, because I've got such a hot bod, I'm on Love Island, but that's probably not happening. But the way to get there, my next big success could be actually starting another marathon, because I'm meant to have done a third by now, and I haven't
You've
quite
done two marathons?
Yeah, I've done two, and I set up the Mid-Sussex Marathon weekend, but politics has got in the way of running and doing up most of my clothes. So my next big success will be able to get back in those trainers, and I fell down the stairs in the House of Commons Ironmans and I injured myself, so I haven't been able to do long runs for a while. So if I could get to the end of 26.2 miles and one of the most underrated, amazing female athletes in our country be there to hand me my medal, Paula Radcliffe, yes please.
Excellent. Some very good answers in that round. Right, thank you all very much indeed. On tomorrow's panel, now this will be at 9 o'clock, not 8 o'clock, because Kemi Badenoch will be here at 8, and that's the only time she could do. So we've shunted cross-question back to 9 o'clock. We have one of Mims's Conservative Shadow Cabinet colleagues, Andrew Griffith, Labour MP Luke Murphy, Robin Swan from Northern Ireland's Ulster Unionist Party, and LBC's very own Aggie Chambray. That's tomorrow from 9 on LBC. Now, from 9 tonight, which actually it's already 9, isn't it? I'm late. We are going to talk about the BBC. And it's not, I don't want it to be a BBC bashing out, because whenever you do a phone-in on commercial radio, people think, oh, you're just having a go at the BBC because you can. Well, I don't want to do that tonight, but I do think that there are questions that the BBC has to answer, particularly when there are 2 reports out today that show that all sorts of things went wrong. But it's not just these things where Tim Davie, the Director General, I think, has questions to answer. The Glastonbury live stream fiasco, Gary Lineker's comings and goings, Greg Wallace, obviously, Hugh Edwards pleading guilty to child pornography offences, Martin Bashir's handling of the Diana interview, etc., etc., etc.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 9 o'clock, a couple have been found guilty of the gross negligence manslaughter of their newborn daughter after going on the run. Baby Victoria was discovered in a carrier bag in a Brighton shed in early 2023. The family had been living in a